I'm not up to date with that, but we can definitely talk about that.
Alright, whenever we get to my input section. Because it's one of those things that, like, it fucking irritates the shit out of me.
No problem. Ain't no problem, buddy. Just let me do a quick opening. Excuse me, for the love of God, I'm having a lot of gastric problems lately. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, so are we. We all go until like November 15th.
Oh God, it's gonna be a great end of the year, or bad end of the year. I don't know. It's gonna be fun. Anyways, guys, welcome to the Brothers of Liberty. I'm Jacob, and with us today is Cody. How you doing, buddy?
How's it going, people?
Anyways, I was just thinking we kind of just wing it a little bit. Cause I had a lot of stuff planned, but for the most part, we.
Kyle's not here for me to bounce off of, so.
Yeah, and
It's probably the best option.
and with me, let's be honest, I'm not like super. I'm very milk toast in my opinions for the most part. I'm pretty just in the middle, and it doesn't really matter to me. I don't like corruption either, so I'm very interested to see what you have on Hunter Biden, to be honest with you. But at least with me, the main two topics I just wanted to talk about would be the just to catch up on the debates for the most part, just get a reaction, what you thought about it, and then I still wanted to talk about the Supreme Court because I have a lot of concerns about Amy Coney Barrett and whatnot. But that's just how yeah. Those are.
Let's start with the Supreme Court then.
Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing your concern.
Well, to give a bit of a recap, RBG, let's be 100, because if I'm going to be 100% honest, full disclosure, since I've been doing my whole understanding thing and basically just I've basically unintentionally have started going into John Marshall, who's one of the greatest chief justices in this country's history. He's basically...
When was he the Chief Justice during?
He was the second ever Chief Justice. The very first one was John Jay, when the Supreme Court was...
Okay.
Yeah. So John Jay established the Supreme Court in 1790 with the Judiciary Act that Washington implemented after the Constitution was ratified. The Jay Court didn't do anything, and
That was the act that basically created the circuit courts and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yes, created the circuit courts.
One big thing the anti-federalists were entirely against was a centralized court where people couldn't go to federal court if, you say you lived in New Hampshire and it was based in Virginia.
Yes.
Okay.
It was to supersede all the state courts and all the state bullshit that they had to do for the most part. So they decided they were going to create, as the last act, the ultimate court of all courts, which is the Supreme Court. But, back then...
The Supreme Court was a part of, the federal court that was established by the federal system to deal with federal matters. Just one of the things that the anti-federalists were concerned about was the distance that one centralized court might have against their more rural or stretched out states back in the day when horse and buggy was your fastest mode of transportation.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and it was also partly why initially too. Well, I mean, because in fairness, it wasn't until Marshall that the actual Supreme Court really had any legitimacy or functional power. That's why, like, the Jay courts, which effectively stretches for the first decade of this country's existence, ultimately really had no power. Little tidbit, they didn't really...
That functionally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That would have been the first court of its kind, basically, in the first system of its kind.
Yes.
So there being, growing pains definitely makes a lot of sense on that type of an issue.
Yeah, and then just historically speaking, just to wrap it up, Jay ends up leaving. He's getting old. He's like, I already did my Federalist papers, and then Marshall takes over, and then the whole important case of Marbury versus Madison gives legitimacy to the Supreme Court, which makes it the ultimate superpower. That's a very complicated case, and
I'm just going to double check. Look, there's a couple things I'm very history.
I
And some
can
of the specific courts.
yeah, I can explain some things if it helps, if anything.
No, that's fine. I just need to like look at the brief thing to tell me what it was. 'Cause,
Oh yeah, no problem.
yeah, that was the one that established judicial review. Yeah, no, that was definitely a hallmark, because that basically created what the Supreme Court is now
Yep.
by setting the precedent that the Supreme Court can and will overturn, stuff
It's
from the states, and begins injecting the Constitution into state government laws.
mhm. And what's funny too is ironic is Jefferson and John Marshall. They're actually cousins. And they hate each other, and
Doesn't surprise me.
and they're both ideologically opposed. So Jefferson did the whole thing.
Jefferson was pro-federalist.
No, and he was technically he's an anti-federalist by nature. He's a Democratic Republican. John Marshall was the Federalist specifically.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, like,
Well, he wasn't anti-Constitution. Yeah.
right. I was very much so even then, like pro and anti-federalist is kind of a silly denigrate. Like the federalist and anti-federalist, that doesn't give a good description of what the anti-federalists worried about, because they were really, really worried about. They were effectively small government states' rights people, and they wanted to make sure that the Constitution was as limiting as people said it was.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and that was like the one big key argument was the Federalists, the anti-Federalists, did not like the elastic clause in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were like, no, dude, this could be, used against your idea. Like, yeah, you're saying it'll be kept small and they won't be able to touch anything outside of what's generally listed. But that elastic clause, which was a necessary clause, because it to not overly restrict the constitutional government the same way that the previous government system was, to just be like, yo, if there's something we forgot that's necessary, yeah, you can do it. But they were very much like, no, unless there's restrictions put on this, unless there's a Bill of Rights, this system won't work. So they were very much like, I would be more saying, not necessarily anti-federalist, anti-constitution. They were constructive critics of the system that was being proposed.
No, absolutely.
They were definitely, while the Constitution and the American system of government, in my opinion, is the closest thing that we're going to get to a perfect system of governance, and I can explain that. The initial, it needed some correction, especially because of that elastic clause, because we've seen now that the federal government stretches its reach beyond everything that was, that it was intended to do originally.
Yeah.
And it's all because of the modern interpretation of the elastic clause.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole point of the Constitution is so that, it can be amended. It wasn't this all-powerful, strict. That's why, I go back and forth between, a strict constitutionalist and one that's much more of a broad comprehensive perspective with a modern context in terms of the Constitution.
The living document versus,
yeah.
as is. I'm one of the people that I'm much more of a as-is type of person.
Generally, yeah.
Because of the fact that it can be changed, right? It has in the document itself, there is the ability for it to be a living document. You just have to get enough, people on board to change it.
Not to mention too.
What's that?
Oh, not to mention too. If I had to choose between a strict constitutionalist and one that's much more of a broad perspective kind of individual, I tend to choose the strict one only because, worst case scenario, you have your rights, and the strict or the broad constitutionalist might actually end up creating more precedents that might actually end up harming people more. I mean,
the broad constitutionalist would create precedent.
Which is what I was going to go into with Barrett and a couple of the other people.
I kind of disagree with that. Yeah, we can talk about that because I like. Oh, broad. Okay, I kind
Yeah, no, no.
like strict constitutionalist,
Like,
or versus
yeah, like,
somebody that thinks the living document.
yeah, like a strict constitutionist is like Second Amendment rights. You're gonna have your guns, but a more broad constitutionalist individual might perceive it in terms of like, well, modern times, it's less violent, et cetera, so there's less likely, you know what I'm saying?
Personally, that's why I love Amy Coney. Like I've been, like I wanted him to put her up instead of Kavanaugh because I don't like Kavanaugh's thoughts on the Fourth Amendment. I was like wanting her to be put in way back then because during the Kavanaugh hearings and all that, when Kennedy just retired, I looked into most of the people that Trump put up, and Amy Coney Barrett is two things. She says she's a strict constitutionalist, but she also believes in stare decisis, which is huge because it basically means like, if something has already been decided, she's not gonna fuck with it. Excuse my French. She's not gonna mess with it, and that if somebody wants it, if there's already been precedent and all that kind of stuff, she's not gonna go back and screw with it. She's gonna leave it up to the legislation to change, which means she's not gonna she doesn't believe in legislating from the bench.
Well,
that's my biggest. That's how I think judges should be.
I don't know. I definitely. Well, that's also dependent. It depends too, because I'm not a full stare decisis person, only because a lot of people and a lot of particular lawyers, judges might use cases that are clearly atrocious and bad, and use it in their particular current court cases in order to justify their court rulings. I think because
I definitely think that's fair because people suck. But
I'm not against stare decisis. Because I actually tend to agree with it a lot more, but it's also tough too because the unfortunate reality is like, hypothetically speaking, most people won't, but like, and people have actually used like the Dred Scott case as justification for stuff like that, or Korematsu, and in fact, people have actually. It's the low key, since I'm Japanese. Basically, Japanese people suing for their freedom during World War II when they were locked in their internment camps, and the Supreme Court. Well, and the Supreme Court specifically ruled that what they did was legal in times of war, which judicially means, and hypothetically in terms of a precedent, that in times of specific distress or potential dangers, that it's been broadly used, that the federal government can really just lock whoever the fuck they want. And
while I think what we did with the internment camp stuff is bad, I also think that a lot of people don't. I look at it realistically, and sometimes when you're at war, you gotta do shit to win.
Oh no, I don't.
They had proof that there were spies at Pearl Harbor that told them when.
Oh, I absolutely don't. Yeah, I don't disagree. But it's just tough too because on the other end of the spectrum, there are
people that shouldn't have been arrested.
Like, are you? Like imagine if we did that shit today with the entire Muslim population during the War on Terror. Like, that's definitely not gonna fly. Although,
no, but at the same time, I think we are also very ham-handed when it comes to that stuff. And that kind of brings in the whole Patriot Act and stuff like that. We don't need to lock people up anymore because it's the modern world. You just need to be able to spy on their internet. Right?
Exactly.
And so we do effectively do the same thing, or at least we get the same end. Now we just use the Patriot Act and it gives us the same access.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I understand.
But I also think today that I don't think that people today in today's culture would have what it takes to do what we did in World War II.
Oh, no.
I just
definitely not today.
Don't think that we have, at least not at first, right?
Mhm.
You start getting the records of the death tolls and the drafts, and you go, yeah, these people are trying to murder us, because Pearl Harbor, and I've seen people try and defend Japan for Pearl Harbor, and it just makes me giggle.
Yeah, I don't.
Because
I'm never gonna defend that. That's
well, no,
moronic.
not you.
No,
Don't get me wrong.
no. I know. In general, though, I feel you, homie. I feel you.
Yeah, like I'm very much a fan of Imperial Japanese history, not in the fact that I'm like, oh, they're so awesome. Like, no, they're just fucking epic.
It's fascinating.
From in the span of 70 years, they went from bow and arrow cavalry sword fighters to they're taking on the modern
yeah.
and kicking the shit out of everybody.
Oh yeah.
Really only died because they didn't have enough oil.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like they advanced so quickly in the span of like just 10 years. When America came, they're like, oh shit, we gotta step our game up, homie.
Oh yeah, like I am realistically, I'm a huge fan of that stuff. But even then, like you can understand the motives and the reasoning and stuff like that from behind what they did at Pearl Harbor. They were basically like, well, if all we have to do is put up with the dregs of the Western world by taking out the American fleet, then if we can get them out, the Western fleet all out in one blow, we can basically make it impossible for the Western world to fight us, because it was the Western world that was causing them. Anyway, this is kind of a side tangent.
I gotcha. Anyways,
I could do hours on everything.
Well, anyway.
Back to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Anyways.
What is it that you don't like about Amy Coney Barrett?
Well, first off, I just wanted to point out what I thought were like the top 4 nominees, potentially. They were Bridget Bade. She's in the 9th Supreme Court. She was number 4. She was 4th place.
She needs to stay in the 9th Circuit.
Yeah, she needs more time.
No. She needs to stay in the 9th Circuit because the 9th Circuit is the West Coast, and there needs to be at least some sort of dissenting opinion in the 9th Circuit. That way, because you gotta, the 9th Circuit is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The 9th Circuit are the people that caused the cages at the border to be made.
Oh, yeah.
The 9th Circuit, everybody forgets that. Everybody's like, oh, Trump kids in cages. That came about because the 9th Circuit said that Obama couldn't, intern the children with their parents. So
yeah.
They had to create holding cells for the children that were being forced to come across, because there's a lot of shit that happens where those children have to get tested to make sure that they're not getting human trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, I was very much pro leave her on the 9th Circuit because of stuff like that, where no, the 9th Circuit needs to be reined in because they do shit like that.
I gotcha.
They're also
protection. I gotcha.
Yeah, they're also the ones that will read Constitution says A, not B, and they'll be like, nah, B's fine. They have outright gone, and that's the route I'm pretty sure that they took. The Heller versus something, where we were literally one vote away from the Supreme Court saying the Second Amendment didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me is utterly insane.
I know. So there's purpose for her. I feel you. I understand. The other two outside of Barrett were the two front runners aside from her were Barbara Lagoa and Allison Jones Rushing, and
Barbara Lagoa was the one that's of Cuban descent, right?
Yeah, if I would be honest, okay. So here was my thought process, because those were like the top 3 that initially were the ones that were gonna get it eventually. Rushing was last. Rushing was in last, but she was also.
I think she's gonna get it when Trump wins again.
Yeah,
and that the other 82-year-old Justice Crooks.
Yeah, I think she needs 2 more years. Probably get some more. The only reason why she won't get it is because she was literally just put on a year and a half ago, and also she's 38. So.
Well, the same thing happened with Amy Coney Barrett. If they put a 38-year-old conservative freaking Cuban lady in, I would shit my pants with excitement.
Oh no, but because
I'm sorry, the Cubans are always like avidly anti-socialist, and that's what makes them sweet.
and
Uh,
and that's what because with rushing was difficult because she's young and they were going to do everything they could to, and I would even
he had to convince the Republicans that the person he was putting up would be worth it for them, and for a lot of people like Josh Hawley and stuff who were very socially conservative, someone like
bringing Tom Cotton.
Someone that'd be a fucking death knell for the Republic. I like Tom Cotton, but that dude is so anti-Roe v. Wade that it's ridiculous. At least with Amy Coney Barrett, it would be something more along the lines of like, hey, you brought yourself to Supreme Court. We know Roe v. Wade exists, but let your state figure it out. We're not dissolving Roe v. Wade as long as access is available. Something. Tom Cotton would like push to have for any of the first cases that he did to abolish Roe v. Wade. And while I'm not necessarily a pro-choice person, I lean a little more pro-life. I still understand why Roe v. Wade as a decision is still currently necessary until people because nobody understands what it is anymore. They don't understand that it took it from being a states' rights, a state thing to a federal thing, which is why most Republicans are like, we don't fucking like Roe v. Wade, and that's merely because it's not something the federal government should do.
I feel you. There's just a lot of very, not intellectually sound people in this country. But anyways,
you have that on the right and left. You have your your typical like redneck America, and you have your typical types on both sides, and they're all stupid.
But yeah, aside from that, the top two that were probably going to get it were Barrett or Lagoa. They were the most two.
Always gonna be Barrett.
I thought Lagoa had a.
You're kidding yourself if you didn't think it was Barrett.
Well,
he said Barrett with Kavanaugh, and like people lost their minds with excitement.
Here's my problem, because I look at Barrett getting the nomination as a bit of a worrying sign for me personally.
Why is that?
Well, first and foremost, along with Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Roberts, and Alito, they're all part of the Federalist Society. I don't know. I have a very indifferent opinion of the Federalist Society. I think they just.
What is the Federalist Society?
It's basically, I guess you could say, the conservative judicial. How do you say it? Process of like not wringing out the judges and whatnot, but like like.
More of the conservative judiciary group.
Yeah.
I would have an issue with something like that if to me when Roberts has shown to be socially liberal on a lot of things. So
I guess let me put it to you this way. I thought at the very least, and this is my thought process. If you chose Lagoa, then Trump was making a decision consciously based off of him and not being influenced by really anyone else. Like, he was just going to look at a picture and be like, Lagoa, Florida, minority, she's going to get it with no problems whatsoever,
but then he looks at Barrett's like a suburban white woman with a bunch of adopted kids and two Haitians. This will piss everybody off.
And
I see what you're saying, but
my biggest issue is that I think a lot of people have really been pushing Barrett onto Trump, and I thought he had enough. And in fairness, he knows. I don't think he knows.
I don't think so. To be 100% honest with you, I think he was probably presented with her, and then really likes the way she thinks, because he has always said that he likes constitutional originals. So he likes Scalia. That's why a lot of people like Scalia, despite the fact that Scalia was kind of a fucking scumbag.
Yeah, I like Scalia, and I think Gorsuch, other than a couple of decisions, has really been, judiciating like that.
Gorsuch is a good moderate, and he's also a stare decisis kind of person.
Yeah.
But a couple of the things that I don't like that cases, and one of them was like the census case, where he and one of the things on immigration where he's like, I'm not saying no, but I'm saying not right now because even though you guys are right, you need better reasoning. And that's where I go, all right, Gorsuch, if they're right and the Constitution says A, then, then it needs to be A. And so one of the big things was the whole citizenship on the census. And I'm pretty sure it was Gorsuch that was that was like a swing vote on that one. But basically, even though I forget what article of the Constitution, normally I'm pretty good. But it specifically calls out that the census is supposed to be for only citizens. Because it at the time, immigrants and stuff like that, or illegal immigrants, would have been what was said in there, which is basically like, yeah, we're not counting the Indians on reservations that live in the land. Not reservations because those didn't exist at the time, but it was basically like we're not counting. The census is to be for, in what words they used it for citizen then, and then they said not to include, and then they used like Indians to say, okay, we're not talking about people that aren't citizens. And that's where one of the ones where like a Barrett or a Scalia would be like, this is what the Constitution is trying to say, this is what it was intended as, so this is how we're going to vote on it.
I guess.
Whereas, Kavanaugh or Gorsuch didn't vote that way, but his ideology as far as being on the bench is enough that I'm like, well, if I didn't think that there was a political party trying to change the fucking census to get political power in California, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but that's what they're trying to do.
I guess ultimately, I'm not shocked that he chose Barrett. To be brutally honest, I'm just more of I thought he had much more of a, I guess, personal input, at least personally speaking, and that's just my personal perspective and again, I'm not surprised because I always felt like Trump was going to have help with, in terms of picking his Supreme Court justices. I mean, every single one of them that he's picked, and basically the last 5 Republicans. Well, I just felt like he was going to. Well, to be fucking honest, I just felt like it was just the smarter decision to pick Lagoa, and at the very least, she just would have gone through easily. There would have been no argument to get her in, and there's.
I don't think she would have gone through as easily as Barrett's gonna do, because one of the things that you got to recognize is like not ever. So some Republican senators live in kind of swingy-ish states, and some of them are up for re-election. So unless it was somebody that's like worth it for them to risk their election on because of what happened with I'm forgetting his name, the dude that Obama put up and McConnell was like,
Eric something. No,
Eric.
Garland.
Yeah, Garland. Something Garland. Anyway, like Merrick Garland. Yeah, so unless it was somebody that was really worth it for him, like there was a couple Republican senators that were like, nah, and Romney being one of them in Utah, loves Amy Coney Barrett. She's a religious person with 7 kids. That's fucking Utah to a T.
I'm also pointing out like the Democrats too. The Democrats trying to vote against a specific minority from immigrant parents. That's going to be hard for them to also justify as well.
Like, don't get me wrong, she was my second. Where I'm like, if Trump were to literally nominate a female, Cuban person of color, he would probably get a vast majority of the Hispanic vote.
Yeah.
But I'm at the same time glad he didn't play identity politics, because I want that lady on the 9th Circuit, because I'm tired of being like, if anything, all the crazies in California just get an easy win on the 9th Circuit.
I feel you. So.
And it's like bullshit, all the different like bullshit that comes along with having the 9th Circuit be filled with ideologues, like it was during the initial period of Trump's presidency.
So I guess my perspective is, I'm guessing obviously you probably like Barrett. I think I'm.
Like I said, I was very much pro Barrett Kavanaugh's one of those people that's is kind of like a late boomer that doesn't understand technology.
I guess. Well, Kavanaugh, I'm actually pretty indifferent by. I think it's also because, like, obviously he's going to have some very pro-government stuff, but he's on the right side, at least in terms of the lockdowns for the most part. I guess I'm not necessarily pessimistic. I'm pessimistically optimistic about Barrett because I've done a little bit of my own deep dive on her, and I've tried to look at a couple of her own court cases, and every.
Do you think she's immensely qualified?
It's not about qualifications. It's about some of her rulings and justifications for her rulings, because everyone's pointing to like a couple of specific cases about her. Like she has like one or two that. Well, I can't think of any off the top of my head right now. I should have wrote it down. She has.
I know that people have not liked outside of her the fact that she's religious and could be against abortion is that she's not as pro-worker as the left would want.
No, she's aggressively pro-business. But so was Lagoa too, to be honest. So.
Right, but I mean, there's like pro-business and like anti-state freaking intertwinement with unionism is different because one of the litmus tests that people have been doing is the right to work. And basically what a big thing with that is states have linked up to make laws backed by the union that effectively forces anybody who wants to work in a trade that has a union to go into the union. And right to work is basically destroying that because states have set it up so that unions are so powerful that a union gets to dictate labor and wages and all this kind of stuff. So they feel that okay, the unions have done all this work to effectively set the standard wages. So even non-union people are going to get paid roughly the same as union people, and maybe even a little less because of how much unions take off the top. So people are basically forced to pay union dues even if they're not in the union. And right to work is basically saying no, if someone's not in the union, they're not in the union. And that's the only thing that I've really seen that people don't necessarily like about her, but I'm sure there's something I'm missing because I was just like, initially when I saw that she was on there, I'm like, oh my god, this would be the perfect person to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Don't get me wrong. Look, because it started with a couple of prominent lawyers that I tend to follow and really look at, and like.
You watch like Eagle Frey and Robert Barnes.
Oh yeah, I watched them, and then I did my own little deep dive too for the most part, and there was a couple of really startling cases. Like there was 5 that were specifically gun cases, and 2 that were very, I guess you could say, pro-constitutionalist, but then 3 that were very against the Second Amendment. God, I wish I actually had them, because I wrote this entire script that I had this idea of like a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to work on it, but then I started the understanding stuff that I was trying to do, so I kind of stopped working out that.
If you want to take a second to look them up, I can ramble about something for like a minute or two.
Okay, if you give me one quick second. It's just gonna take a while,
no,
but
like I kind of get what you're saying, but I'm also in the same words, in the same concept of what Bill Clinton said, that the Second Amendment is not something that you can swallow whole. I think at the same time, protecting the Second Amendment with the way it is now is going to be as hard as it is for people to take it away, because we do live in a society where mentally ill people, background checks, all this kind of stuff. That as much as I'm like a staunch Second Amendment advocate, I also am like, yeah, background checks, I'm okay with that. I mean, they already, like almost all states do.
Yeah, I'm okay with the Brady rule. I'm okay with all that stuff,
background
actually.
checks and stuff like that. And in a lot of cases, the things have gotten so complex and convoluted over gun laws that somebody can actually make a positive ruling, or somebody can try and make a positive law, and it freaks out the right because they're like, oh my god, my guns, and then the left going, but you're not doing enough. I mean, one big thing was like, so I always forget his name, but the Texas guy who's a former SEAL, that's represented Crenshaw. So one of the laws that he tried to get passed was basically giving states the ability to use databases that the federal government has for background checks. Mm-hmm. And it pissed off the right because they were like, oh my god, red flag laws and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, well, sure, that states with red flag laws it'll make it easier for them to enforce. At the same time, it's making it much faster for background checks to go through and for police to catch criminals trying to buy guns.
I got you.
I'm okay. I'm like, I understand the necessity of something like that coming from the right in today's world. Because if the right doesn't take that kind of action, where it's more of like a protective attack, for lack of a better word, the left is going to be the ones that end up doing it, and they're going to fuck it. They're going to screw it all up.
I got you.
The last time that we had the current laws that govern guns is insane. I don't know if you've ever seen how you can make a rifle a pistol and it's legal, but you can't. But you put a stock on a pistol and it's all of a sudden a rifle and illegal.
I know. I feel you, dude. I feel you. And just want to say then, I don't know how I feel about Barrett. I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah, I mean, to me, just the plain fact that she's stare decisis and a constitutionalist assuages a lot of concerns. Because the worst case scenario is that she's going to look at a bunch of cases and go, this is either unconstitutional or the state gets to decide. And if at the end of the day it comes down to her, her saying the state gets to decide something, and then I'm like, well, okay, it's your state, you get to figure it out.
I just feel like she's probably going to end up being more like a Roberts than anything else, and I'm just worried about that.
Yeah, I'm very much not pro Roberts, because Roberts has been, everyone's like, oh, he's a conservative.
Roberts is an establishment authoritarian Supreme Court justice. I mean, he just does whatever he wants.
He's very much...
And I'm just afraid Barrett's going to be like that.
Because I personally think that, we have a court right now that's filled with a lot of, they're conservative in the sense that they operate for business, but they're authoritarian. Some of them are authoritarians, like Roberts.
No, Roberts is.
With a lot of that kind of stuff. And that's something that pisses me off. And I think with her being an original is because right now I think the pendulum has swung too far in favor of the left in regards to social issues. And I think there needs to be a little bit of kickback against them. And I'm not talking stuff like gay marriage and everything like that. I'm very libertarian on gay marriage, weed, and all that stuff.
I feel you. I feel you.
How, that if, things with, freedom of speech on college campuses. I think if something like that were to come to the Supreme Court, we need social conservatives to go, yeah, fuck them. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. I think we need more protections against how the social left act in a lot of cases, and the social authoritarians act in a lot of cases.
I feel you, buddy.
I guess we have the same worry, but different.
I just worry about it more. That's all.
Outcome of her, because I don't think she's going to be a Roberts.
I'm pretty sure she's going to be Roberts, but I'm hoping for the best. I guess that's just my opinion of it.
I mean, God forbid, if, not God forbid, I hope that Trump wins because I don't think the government can handle Obama 2.0.
I know.
That's all.
Me too,
buddy.
buddy. So let's talk about your thing first, and then we could talk about some potential election odds, and then just bullshit after that. What do you say about that?
All right. So my thing is effectively corruption, and this is what really got me politically activated in 2016. I'm in the Navy. I have a secret clearance. I deal with the government's way of handling classified information on a daily basis. When I saw Hillary Clinton get off for her emails, I was livid.
Was it like spam, porn spam?
No,
just kidding.
No. She had top secret, highly classified stuff on her emails. So the point that
I know, I got you.
When they had people that were when they had to have the investigators come in to do it, they had to read them in to like 5 different levels of top secret clearance programs and before they could touch it. Right? That is BS. So when I saw that, it was kind of one of those moments of like, wait, she's getting off? What the hell is going on? Because not only did she, have this stuff, she destroyed everything in the face of a subpoena. And to me, I was already like kind of pissed off about the email thing, but then let alone when it's like, oh, she destroyed everything in the face of a subpoena, and then I saw the media basically lying about it because they have no idea what confidential information is. They have no idea the things that we put in. They have no idea
They don't know the minute details.
They were making shit up to cover for it, and I literally, bro, I'm from California. I've always been, kind of, and even like it pissed off my family, but I was like pro-Obama. I was pro the ACA at first, or at least I was pro-public option, and I still kind of am. But I would have been a default liberal had I not seen that type of thing happen. Right? I always leaned a little bit more conservative. There was some stuff that happened during the Obama years that I was like, whatever, it kind of made me libertarian. I voted libertarian in 2016 because I was like, well, what the fuck is Trump? Like a lot of people, and now I'm a staunch Republican. Like there's nothing else. I did like one of those I side with things, and I'm like 94% in agreement with Trump apparently. So I'm not necessarily even a staunch Republican. I'm a fucking staunch, like Trumper, I guess is the best way to put it.
So you're center right? I feel you.
Yeah, center right. On quite a bit of stuff. So, and this comes down to corruption because I hate corruption.
We all do, buddy. We all do. I feel you.
I hate elitists. I hate all this kind of stuff. So when I saw Hillary Clinton get away with everything that she did, and like, because I have gotten in trouble, not like trouble going to jail, but I've gotten slapped on the wrist for like, bro, you didn't put up your confidential information. What the hell's wrong with you? Okay, you're coming in on Saturday night at midnight to do security robes in the building because you didn't put this away right. Okay, so for basically not really doing anything wrong, but kind of doing something wrong, I got in trouble, and then this high-level politician is over here breaking the law, absolutely breaking the law, and is still getting to run for president.
Trust me, man.
Started my like anti-corruption, anti-Democrat type of thing because I honestly think that the Democrats are the most corrupt political institution in modern history.
I mean, both Republicans and Democrats. It's just the Republicans ended up leaving and retiring, and Democrats are still there.
So here's the deal. Well, yeah, I don't like old school Republicans either. I don't like the establishment at all. I like people like Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton. You're seeing people like Billy Primpey, Tim Klasick, which are much more like we're gonna go out and do something and attack the left on their bullshit. Especially the new kind of like younger Republicans. Like, do you watch Tim Pool's podcast and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes I do.
Yeah, he's had on, like Billy Primpe is this guy running in New Jersey. He's, his family immigrated from Ghana, and this dude's a Republican, and I'm like, yeah, dude, bro, sweet, just with the way that he's talked. And they're a little bit more liberal in some aspects, but they're very much anti-Democrat. Like, I'm honestly okay with that, because at the end of the day, the establishment Democrats, they have everything. They have media. They now have Wall Street. They have, all of the big corporate institutions that might have formerly voted.
And they're woke. I'm just kidding.
Republicans, they now back the Democrats because they finally figured out, the Democrats have all of the media. And that's a huge thing, because it's also like a recent-ish development. The media has only been not forced to be objectively fair for the last 33 years.
Well, in fairness, I would probably say, at least historically speaking, media's always had a liberal bias, even fucking all the way until the 20s. But specifically, Democratic leading liberal bias, I feel you.
The fairness doctrine used to be a thing, right? And Reagan got rid of this to protect talk radio, because, who the fuck can foresee, massive media conglomerations and stuff like that. But two big things happened that have caused the media to be so idiotic, because the media has never been this insane, right? People like, you and I are like, well, it's probably always been like this. No, it hasn't. Two huge things have happened. One, Reagan got rid of the fairness doctrine. The fairness doctrine used to say that if I spent an hour talking about, let's say my news agency spent an hour talking about pro-life ideology with pro-life people. Well, the FEC would enforce those TV shows and those outlets to then spend an equal amount of time or an equal amount of space in their newspaper covering the opposite side with the same level of enthusiasm, basically. Like, if you brought on a PhD from MIT from one place, for pro-choice, you couldn't bring on, like, a dude with a GED that's ardently anti-abortion and have it be the same thing. So that happened, right? And then another thing that you had happen is, and this is another thing that Reagan did, and this is one of the reasons why when people are like, I'm like, you have no idea how some of the things that Reagan did that actually hurt the fabric of the country. Suddenly, it's just taken a while. Reagan also went and made it so that monopoly rules weren't applied as harshly, so that you could have large chunks of industry.
Yep.
And that's good in some areas, but not in all.
I don't think that's good at all, but yeah, I feel you.
In the media world was an acceleration of mono media, where right now you have, and it didn't used to be this way, but you have like 6 companies that own all of the news media in America. And even the local outlets, right? Most local outlets, Cairo 7 Fox, whatever, local outlets are still owned by the big mega company. And so there's 6 of them for the whole country that all share the same talking points.
I know, I feel.
What ended up happening is Fox News was actually a response to this, because the media outlets began, once they, the feelers were put out and people were going like, oh wait, we can start being more biased? Oh my. They began to become more and more biasedly liberal, and Robert Murdoch, the guy who owns Fox, went like, oh, there's a hole in the market for conservative. He was right. And then they created Fox News in the late 90s, about 10 years after the Fairness Doctrine. Got eaten alive by Reagan. So media didn't used to be this insane, right? They really didn't. Well, they used to, I know like Walter Cronkite said, he's quoted as, and Steven Crowder always quotes this, like, you can't be a journalist and not be liberal. But the second half of that quote is Walter Cronkite explaining that to be liberal for him is defined as somebody who's willing to be objective and look at all the evidence from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So the hardcore people, the big boys in journalism, they were much more inclined to be objective. Now, were they always objective? No.
Mm-hmm.
Was it as bad as Jim Acosta? Absolutely not.
Not as bad as Jim Acosta, but there's a lot of.
It's very, very hard to be as bad as Jim Acosta.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not kid ourselves. That man is one of the worst things that happened to mainstream media in history. But the media, to go kind of come full scale back to what I was talking about with corruption, is now, everybody has been screaming Russia, 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 right? With Trump about corruption, But then they completely ignore stuff like Hunter Biden.
Mm-hmm.
So they impeached Trump now over a phone call, and if you're being even moderately objective, you go, yeah, his phone call is inappropriate, some of the things he said, but there is real, actual evidence that, the whole Russia thing, Hillary Clinton, all that shit was made up.
Mm-hmm.
That the Ukrainians helped, and that there was Ukrainian interference, and that Joe Biden's son should have nothing to do with, should not have been on the board of that place. And then if you're really, really informed, like I am, you understand that one of the reasons that he got put on that place is because of the geopolitical posturing, trying to get Ukraine to be more in charge of the natural gas pipelines because of different things that have been happening.
Yeah.
Nationalization of Ukraine's natural gas industry and what they're doing with Russia, and where they were trying, same geopolitical bullshit, to release Russia's death grip on the natural gas industry in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that aren't informed look at what the media says and goes, "Oh my God, Trump was colluding," and then somebody who moderately distrusts the media that looks at that and goes, "No, that's bullshit. There's obvious corruption going on here by Hunter Biden." And especially when you get the video of Joe Biden going in and being like, "Get rid of the guy that was investigating my son. He's corrupt." So you see that and you go, "What the fuck?" Right? It just makes you go,
Yeah, I got you.
and okay, he's obviously corrupt. But then you see stuff like what came out recently, where Hunter Biden is literally receiving massive payments from Russian billionaires, $3.5 billion,
Mm-hmm.
and then also other $1 million payments to all of the various things he owns from the same people. So we've spent the last how long freaking out about Russia, and now you have literal Russian collusion by somebody running for president,
Mm-hmm.
and they're in Russia and their children, and nothing.
It's probably all for cocaine. Just kidding.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also, let's talk about Hunter Biden a little bit more. The guy got kicked out of the Navy Reserves Officer Corps, which he probably only got because his dad was a senator,
Mm-hmm.
for smoking cocaine, for doing cocaine,
Mhm.
right? If he wasn't Hunter Biden, he would have probably been kicked out for other stuff, and he got a dishonorable discharge instead of a general.
Mhm.
He also has gotten arrested while his dad's been running, or in the last few years, for doing crack at a strip club in the middle of the country. And he's been taken to court more than once for not paying child support.
So like a normal Tuesday.
Everybody focuses in on Trump, and I don't necessarily I used to not like Trump,
Mhm.
but then the more I'm getting into this stuff, the more I'm like, it doesn't matter if I like Trump or not. Fuck you, fuck the media, fuck the Democrats, because they gave us Hillary Clinton. They forced the hand to give us Joe Biden, and this is pure corruption. So let's also talk about more corruption. There was a housing bill there was a bill passed in Congress for federal government to basically start selling off property that it had, that it doesn't need to be used anymore.
Mhm.
Do you want to know whose real estate agency got the contract for that?
I'm gonna guess the Biden.
Feinstein's husband. Do you want to know? So the company that once RussiaGate started, there became a lot of basically a whole little micro industry started up of people that were out to digitally prove Russian collusion and all of that stuff like that. I'm forgetting the name of the company that was the big one that the Democrats used.
I don't know. I can't think of it at the top of my head.
Here, let me do a quick Google. But basically, God damn it, stop popping up. So I'll think of it. I watched this big long video from Jimmy Dore about it earlier. But these people, they're owned by Democrat operatives. They are like Nancy Pelosi, the devil spawn that she is, owns has millions of dollars invested into the company. And they are directly funded and started by them, and they hired the same Fusion GPS people that the DNC hired to falsely frame Trump as that whole Steele dossier, the PIS dossier thing.
The PP, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's all a whole bunch of profiteering on it, because as soon as it became a big industry, it's pissed me off that I'm not remembering their name, because they testified in front of Congress and had to admit that they actually have no data proving that the DNC was hacked by Russia and all of this stuff. But regardless, so you have this, this obvious lie inclusion. Then you have people like Schiff, Representative Adam Schiff. If I had the ability, I've seen more than whatever evidence that Trump is guilty. Show us. Joe Probe came back with nothing, so show us what you've got about that. And then nobody holds him accountable. The media doesn't get up there and go, well, Representative Schiff, you made all these claims. Do you mind backing them up at all now? Because everything came out wrong, right? So you would just have all this mass corruption, and this isn't even getting into Democrats and their donors, or even Republicans and their donors. I honestly don't care. Corruption goes both ways. It's just when the media is looking out for you, and that was one big thing. The day the Senate report came out, with proof that Hunter Biden took, millions of dollars from Russians, everybody in the liberal media immediately came out going, "Oh, this is nothing to see here, nothing to see here," and you're like, "Well, no, I mean this sounds like something to see. Let's talk about it. If his last name was Trump, we would know every single thing about it.
Oh yeah.
Hands down, but we don't, because it's a Democrat. And there's only so much. People always look to go, well, Fox News is in it for the Republicans. It's like, okay, you've got one news agency. Fox News is one of the only mainstream news agencies that gives they're not even in it for the Republicans. They just are okay with the Republicans, because Tucker Carlson has come out lambasting Republicans. He had the Republican senator from Indiana on to come and talk about police reform, and made him look like a big old wuss. It just destroyed him on live TV.
Big Daddy Tucker.
Yeah. So this ingrained corruption into our political society, it's only going one way right now. It used to go both ways. I'm not going to sit here and say the Republicans have always been amazing. No, that's not true. They used to be equally big pieces of bread. That's why you see all the old establishment Republicans are retiring out, because they're like, yeah, gigs up. We ain't gonna get the same help we used to.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to play ball with us anymore, so they're retiring out and leaving because they know it's going to be too hard, and they're leaving the rest of the Republicans that are fake because now they're going to go and get to be on Lockheed's board of directors, which that's a whole other thing. Like the fact that that these these representatives and all these people will get to go from being will get these lobbying jobs afterward, because and the worst part about this is it's also, not only do you have all of this corruption, not only do you have media collusion, not only does the media effectively act like the propaganda wing of the Democrat Party in the same way that Joseph Goebbels did for the Nazis, but you have a ton. The Democrats aren't what the Democrats are supposed to be anymore. They have turned into a huge corporatist shill hole, while people still think that they're for the workers.
Oh yeah, they got a lot of people hooked onto that idea.
And it started back with Clinton in the 90s when he did things like NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It started that if he would have been an actual Democrat, he would have gone in and because NAFTA was basically during the transition period between he and Bush Sr.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Bush Sr. pushed in. This is one of the reasons why Ross Perot got third party got 20 million votes in the 90s.
Oh yeah.
Bush Sr. didn't actually do too much bad other than NAFTA, right? But something like NAFTA is right along in with the normal Republican playbook of trying to get free trade to come in and things like that. But and NAFTA itself, also, side note, wouldn't have been bad if illegal immigration would have been controlled.
Mm-hmm.
But because it didn't and it exploded and that suppressed the wages of most of the workers in America, NAFTA became destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Because regardless, right? So you have this crony, left establishment that they have been economically not left in a lot of cases, but socially left. So then every time they do something, they screw it up because they have to be just left enough. But so it always ends up skewing.
Yep. Skewing.
Skewing horribly. And getting checked up, and then their only solution is, oh well, the right failed and the left isn't going far enough. We must need to do more, and it's like, no. We need to do less of this bullshit, because the way that I've always thought about it is a good Teddy Roosevelt approach. His idea was that you need to deregulate the industries so that way companies have an easier time and they have an easier time, but at the same time you need to look at the big business and go, you're going to pay your workers. And then you look at labor and go, you're not going to be fucking stupid. You guys can't get literally everything you want because that's impossible. So Teddy Roosevelt always struck a good fine balance. And by the way, I named my first son after Teddy Roosevelt, so that should
Bully.
how good he was.
Bully for yourself.
Yeah. So the whole concept was to find a balance. Well, right now you have stuff that is so skewed, and this is what Trump really is. He goes, all right, in order to get anything really going, we need to get wages back up, so we need to clamp down on immigration, because if you artificially increase wages by law, that's not going to do anything, right? Because everything's just going to go up. But if you naturally let wages go up by controlling immigration and affecting the supply and demand of workers, that's going to be better for everybody. And then if we cut regulation, we can get small businesses to skyrocket. All of the math shows that he was right. And then, first time wage growth in decades, that we've actually seen wages grow outside of inflation, right? And then we've seen small businesses being better off than ever, and best numbers of our lifetimes, even CNN talks about it. But, so you have the possibility to have an actual moderate that just gets absolutely collapsed by the Democrats being fake as hell and the media not calling them out. And to me, the corruption, especially, it doesn't like the King of Morocco paying $12 million to Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, in order to get a meeting with Hillary Clinton during the presidential race, and nobody bats an eye.
Man,
But
$12 million.
But everybody wants to look at Trump's taxes.
I feel you. It is what it is, brother.
So I
It's just
think
the world that we live in.
that is one of them, like, and it kind of just goes to the, yeah, politicians are going to be corrupt. We all know this. It's not that big of a deal, which is accurate. But at the same time, like, corrupt politicians need the media to be able to hold them account, and we do not have that with the Democrats. And I think that is why things are going so bad right now, is because you have all of these, like, the Republicans will always hold their own to account in a lot of cases, because we'll vote people out, like Steve King, horrible Republican, he got voted out. But the Democrats won't do the same, because they only get politically active every 2 years.
Yep.
And that's what I think is the biggest issue that we have on our plate today, in my opinion, is media, because the media plays into everything. Big tech gets to use bad media coverage. You know, they use biased media coverage as a reason to allow their own biases to get enacted. People don't care. The media has much more power over things than we think they do. We wouldn't go to war unless the media tells us that we should. We don't get mad at things unless the media tells us about the story. The media constantly acts as a narrative controlling gatekeeper, and they always have, right? But
Always.
when they start to have their news be biased and not have nothing bad happen to them, we're in for just a whirlwind of bullshit until, you know. But to be honest, this is how you end up with totalitarian fascists from the right or left, because you're going to get the radicals that get pissed off at the media and then want them legislated, and then that restricts the free press, and then you get this vicious cycle of BS. But in our case, it started because the media has already, you know, become not free by being so biased. They skip steps. It's fascism with extra steps, basically.
I know. I feel you. I see it every day. That's why I end up tuning it out half the time now at this point, because I'm just tired of it. So I feel you.
Well, and I mean, I think in a lot of cases, that's what has happened to a lot of Americans, is they see the bullshit. Like, you know, I forget the name of the study, but they've done studies that show like 90% of Democrats and liberals trust the media, and 90% of conservatives don't trust the media. So our country is effectively divided between those that trust the media and those that don't, in a lot of ways. And I look at that and I go, okay, this is why people get quote unquote conservative as they get older, because eventually they pay attention because something major happens in their life, and then they go, oh my god, I was light.
Exactly. Well, let me ask you then.
Okay.
Just to segue into the next topic then. 2020 election. As of right now, October 11th, 2020. How do you feel? Who do you think is gonna win? Predictions.
I honestly think that we're going to see a Trump electoral college victory. So, as somebody that's into math, data science, and statistics and stuff as I am, because I'm a huge nerd, right? I mean, I do nuclear power for a living, you know. I taught myself, like, coding languages 1 year when I got bored. So, I'm into this stuff. You know, one of the things that people don't really talk about when it comes to polls is that is something that just kind of gets brushed over, and it's called sampling. Well, one of the things that happened to our polling system was after 2016 and the entire debacle that was like, oh, Trump's down 10 points in Wisconsin, but he wins Wisconsin. Trump's down 10 points in Pennsylvania, but he wins Pennsylvania. Now, he doesn't win Pennsylvania or Wisconsin by a lot. He only won by, like, the election by a grand total of, like, 78,000 votes or something. Right?
Yeah.
But in response to this, polling institutes have openly said, yeah, we've changed up our methodology to try and get a more representative sample. So we know the polls were wrong before. We know the polls have changed. And they were changed by people that got stuff wrong in the past. So we have no idea about actual political polling. in a lot of ways, right?
Mhm.
Now you can talk, like national polls and stuff like this, but we're a republic. The national vote doesn't count in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways. It does, but it doesn't, right? Where electoral representation.
Mhm.
What I'm looking at now is there's three kind of major things that I look at. Because one of the things that I always personally say when it comes to like theoretical stuff is the further you get away from real world tangible results into la la land, into the theoretical nonsense, the further away you get from reality, and you're bound to miss something. So what people aren't talking about right now is that the enthusiasm for Trump is astronomical. Right? There are certain trends that we've seen. If any president that's an incumbent gets, 75% of their votes in the primaries,
Mhm.
because the primaries still come out and happen, then they're going to win. They've never lost on that. Trump got 90 some odd percent. He was basically running opposed in most states, and people came out to vote, and they didn't have to.
Mhm.
And the actual outright enthusiasm for him is high.
Mhm.
Right? And so you also have this phenomena that is multiple people seeing it. People aren't comfortable giving out their opinions and all this kind of stuff. That's real. Like, you don't, average people will troll, like, especially when we live in the troll age. Nobody's wants to talk to these pollsters. That's why one of the things that especially when you don't know if your information is actually going to be anonymous, right?
Mhm.
So there have been a couple of polls, and I know I'm saying polls don't count, but there are a couple of polls that take this into account, and they do some predictions because they're like, all right, of the people that are not wanting to say what's going on, they hold these opinions. They're most likely, and they come from these groups, like Republicans, whatever. So they actually think that based on skewed data, if you in their attempts to unskew it in a couple of these, that it's actually 46 to 45 Trump national.
Mhm.
So it's possible that he's actually has a national lead. But then you also look at, so I've already talked about enthusiasm. Enthusiasm polling isn't even one of those ones that you can really skew a little bit to determine the pro and against and oversample here and undersample there. You just look at enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is through the roof for Trump, and Biden enthusiasm is not.
Mhm.
Anti-Trump enthusiasm is, but Biden enthusiasm is not. Now, I tell you what, when I think about the average American dude who is gonna have, even if it's mail-in voting, even if it's absentee voting,
The Trump bros. Mhm.
you have to get people excited about something to get them to vote, right?
Mhm.
And so while you might get the combination of like the anti-Trump people, and then you get the pro-Biden people, I don't think that's going to be enough to overcome the Trump enthusiasm. And then I also think you're going to have a good number of people that are going to get to the voting booth, and even if they don't like Trump, they don't approve of him, they're going to see their economy, the economy that we had before COVID, and go, God damn, I want that back. And they're going to vote for him even if they haven't said that they would before.
Mhm.
And I know it's kind of a little bit of hope and optimism all mixed in the same thing, but I just don't see Biden as bringing out people to vote, especially not with the corona. And then you also see, like, I think 50 to 80% of Democrats say that they're gonna do mail-in voting, and we've also seen during the primaries large 20% of mail-in ballots, because there's a difference between absentee and mail-in. Absentee ballot, you register to vote, you ask them for your ballot because of a reason, they mail it to you, you send it back. Mail-in voting, they just scattershot shotgun ballots to everybody.
Mhm.
So, and they have to be signed, and it has to be same as the way that you sign your voter registration or your license plate or something like that. 20% of votes that were absentee in New Jersey, and millions of votes in the primaries in California, like 1 million votes in California alone, got rejected because they were thrown out. So now you have a situation where like 90% of Republicans are going to vote in person. People that are enthusiastic about Trump are going to go vote in person. And the Democrats, all the people that are anti-Trump, you know, you're probably not going to get people to get off their couch and go vote in person. So a lot of these votes are going to, especially in some key states, are going to be in mail-in, and they're going to get jacked up, right? Because Republicans will go and take their ballot, even if it's mail-in, and they will drop it into the bin, right? A lot of these Republicans, the liberals, because the liberals of late have been people that have been taking advantage of the politically uninitiated. So some random newbie that doesn't know how to do mail-in votes, this has been proven to be the case in a lot of instances, is going to screw up their mail-in ballot. So I really think, and then I kind of see this as being planned because of, like, this is what Democrats are actually expecting to happen, where Trump is going to win, and we won't actually know if that's because he really won or because the ballots are messed up. And then we're going to see 4 years of them going, put up the ballots. It's like, well, you're guys are the ones that change the rules. I really think that he's gonna win, but I am 100% of the opinion that if he didn't have such a like this horseshit media against him, he would win in an almost instantaneous landslide. You know, I honestly, even looking at, like, you know, history and all this, that, and another thing, I don't think that any president in history has had as biased or aggressive against the media. Even Lincoln, right? Because Lincoln had, you know, the ability to throw them in jail and remove habeas corpus because of the Civil War. Cool.
Probably Andrew Jackson, but he still won.
Yeah, but regardless, like, I don't think, especially not in modern times with the way that media is in the modern world, I don't think anybody, you know, historically has had quite the same level of bias against them. And Trump, even with all of the bombshells of this year, still has a 45% approval rating.
People forget how shitty and all over the place Bill Clinton's presidency was. I finished doing a lot of my research on Bill Clinton, and motherfucker still won 56% of the popular vote in the Electoral College. So, I mean, who am I to judge?
So, you know, the liberal fucking, excuse me, I gotta stop cussing because I don't need to. But he also had the liberal media there to back him up in a lot of cases. Right? Like, you know, don't get me wrong, and he was also actually impeached. Don't get me wrong, I don't really care in a lot of ways that, you know, he got a handy under the table. I just don't, you know, cool if you're the president and in turn wants to willingly blow you, cool, go, sure. But he got impeached for lying, and that, you know, that actually matters. So Bill Clinton got impeached, and I'm pretty sure that, and he still got reelected. People still had a positive opinion of him until people started finding out that he was on Epstein's island.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but I think we're seeing a big changing, and I honestly hope that I want Trump to win, not if, because I think it'll be a death knell, you know, the final nail in the coffin for the establishment. This is the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats, because the establishment Republicans need to go just as much as the establishment Democrats.
Absolutely. Get McConnell out of there.
You know, Trump is not a typical Republican. He is just a pro-America, American work ethic dude. And while this may be cringy to say the least, I am honestly, when I would rather have a dude that comes into office rich, so that way he's not going to be tempted. He's not going to do favors to go do these speeches after he gets out that he's going to be paid in front of Wall Street and get paid $500,000 a speech. Obama, Clinton, other Clinton.
John Kerry.
Yeah, like all of these people, you know, so he's less likely to be caught.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is why both establishments didn't like him. They didn't, but the establishment saw like, oh my God, he beat Daddy Ted Cruz. Don't get me wrong, I actually kind of like Ted Cruz. He's newer and he's not as establishment as I think a lot of the other guys are. But that might also be my bias towards him because I like him. I've seen he's one of the guys that's willing to like stand up and fight, and that's more or less what I like about him.
Mm-hmm.
But he beat, I think a lot of the stuff that Trump does that people like about Trump is causing a political revolution in a lot of things. It looks like he has 50% of Latino support in Florida, which is, and if he starts carrying this over to other minority groups, and we actually start seeing a more of a 50-50 split, he's going, and especially if we get 4 more years of him, he's going to create an entirely new political party that lies under the name Republican. And I honestly think that's what we need. I think we need a Republican Party that's, that kind of goes back a little bit and is both pro-business, Teddy, go lay down, and pro-worker at the same time.
I feel you.
Because I can talk all day. Everybody likes to say that the political parties swapped at some point, and they've never swapped. The only thing that has kind of swapped about them is states' rights. Back in the 19th century, the Democrats were states' rights, were motivated on states' rights, and that was because of slavery. The Whigs, on the other hand, weren't necessarily ardent states' rights people. Okay, cool. But the Whigs were still like, Lincoln gave speeches about people picking themselves up by their bootstraps. Right. The Democrats, especially from Jackson period, were still the pro-worker, pro-collective people where they would find like the outside groups of like, oh, the Irish, and that some of that stuff still carries today.
Well, the Democratic.
They would get them to vote collectively.
Well, the Democratic Party was fundamentally founded on the sovereign man, white suffrage. Change these voting things and let the poor man get an opportunity for the most part. So.
Right. Well, I mean, it was also like they were founded during the industrial era and the early stages of socialism. The whole idea of wage slaves.
Yeah, I know the market revolution, industrial revolution. I feel you.
Well, transportation revolution and all this kind of stuff. They combined that with collectivization, right? Because in reality, all of the states that were primarily Whigs did better because the Whigs had a lot of like, we're going to increase the infrastructure during the infrastructure revolution prior to the Civil War and stuff like that. And it actually came later on in the 1850s that there was a huge investment from the South to try and increase their infrastructure, because a lot of them were like, oh my God, we only have like 18% of the country's manufacturing, even though it's kind of stupid because they still had like 60% of the country's economy, because during the 1850s the price of cotton skyrocketed.
Yeah. Britain loves the South.
Yeah, well, they did because they hated France. Because if you look at Britain, they're an island. They have no room to farm cotton.
Exactly. They're the leading, and Great Britain's the leader of. Yeah, and Great Britain was the leader of the Industrial Revolution. So, it'd be what it be.
And the South produced 3/4 of the world's cotton.
Yep. Roughly about that to that point. It's very lucrative to be a southern cotton farmer.
Well, the South was also they were actually very Jeffersonian in a way, because Jefferson wrote about what he thought of the Industrial Revolution, and he didn't like it. He thought that, he was of the opinion of like, if you become a wage slave, it's very un-American.
Well, the big problem with
all that kind of stuff.
But the big fundamental problem with Jefferson is he's not a forward thinking individual. He's someone that can take an idea and make it go really far, but he's not a creative person in the creation of an ideal, I guess. So I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like John Adams is one that can. John Adams' fundamental fucking republic, pardon my language, is basically our country's republic, our constitutional republic. I mean, James Madison got more from.
I need to listen to more of your videos. I'm still like halfway through.
Well, I mean, John Adams created the oldest living constitution in the world, still in effect to this day, which is the Massachusetts State's Constitution. Which the only difference between that constitution and our national constitution that it doesn't have an electoral governing figure, but they have a governor, so they amended it in that particular point of perspective, but still in effect today.
Yeah.
So I mean, most of the stuff that you see from.
The Constitution itself was highly revolutionary.
Oh, no, I'm not saying it isn't, because Madison was. I mean, he read probably 200 different books on European, French, Italian, Greek philosophies just to try and come up with a fundamental amalgamation. And a lot of other people were influenced in a whole bunch of different things. You know, a lot of them had.
I think we did it right because you look at what the possibility of like what amounts to a leftist anti-monarchy movement in the French Revolution, where they were just cutting people's heads off until the guns came out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then Napoleon took over. Like, to me, that's just that's a good indication that you know we did our job right. But I think the problem at the same time with the American system is that we have let it be denigrated to a point where it's not as effective. But I think this is just because of the modern world, and we need to get back to a little bit of it because we're not a democracy, and the federal government should not be doing things. So, like for example, I'm not ardently against healthcare, like government healthcare in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm against is the federal government doing it because the federal government sucks. The VA was only responsible for veterans, and they killed 300,000 of them in the Obama year.
Yep.
So I think that the state government and the smaller levels of government are effectively better equipped to handle that kind of stuff. And people have forgotten this, and they have wound up like, you know, oh, I want the state government to do this, and it's like, or I want the federal government, big daddy federal government to do this. Okay, well, why not? Why not your state? Like California is filled with Democrats and liberals, but the state isn't going like, yeah, we'll provide healthcare. They're like, no, make the federal government do it.
Blame FDR.
What's that?
Blame FDR.
Right. There's a whole lot of stuff you want to blame FDR for. I'm not an FDR fan.
No one is. No one honest is.
I mean, except for the progressives, because he did socialist shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
it is what it is. But anyways, we're getting way off topic. Here's what. So,
we were like on
election.
I think Trump's gonna win.
Here's my perspective. Okay, Trump had about 65 million votes in 2016.
63.
Roughly plus 60 plus, let's say. I think that's the baseline. You know, I mean, I think some people probably left for obvious reasons because they didn't leave. You know, they thought he would do something differently, and the first couple of years were very conflicting. His cabinet was very all over the place, and a lot of his choices were all over the place.
And got rid of people like Bolton.
Yeah.
And decided which he really couldn't.
Jeff Sessions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
God, that guy is a fucking.
But I guess what I'm trying to say though is his base is absolutely fucking grown. I mean, he got me on board and got a whole bunch of other people on board.
I'm voting for him now.
Exactly.
I think that there's a few people that might not be voting for him now because they're massive
Mhm.
With things like the trade war with China, like
Oh yeah.
farmers in certain areas that weren't prepared for the trade war are going against Trump.
So
I'm like,
yeah.
well, he's gonna lose some people, but I think he has picked up a lot of people.
No, a shit ton of people.
Democrats are just so toxic right now.
So I guess.
Unbelievably toxic.
So let's say I think the baseline for him probably is about, at least in terms of the popular vote, probably close to 65 million, maybe plus or minus.
65
And
or 66 or something.
so that's just what I'm guessing, and then after that, it just depends on how people feel about Joe Biden, how many people are actually going to go out and vote for him. And if I'm going to be 100% honest, I go back and forth every other day because those debates were very conflicting for me. For instance, the first one was, because Trump lost, but at the same time, Joe Biden lost more. I would probably argue, at least in that debate.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, Trump was Trump, and I also blame the moderators because people think that the moderators are okay when they're just giving the Republicans the hard questions.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, like during the vice presidential one, like the moderator did a great job. It's like, no, they didn't give her any pressing questions.
I actually watched that debate twice, and I watched half of it on mute, and I was very fascinated when I was watching it, because I think most people would probably tend to vote based off of emotion and how a candidate makes you feel, and I think a lot of it has to do with the personality, obviously, and like things you say. But for the most part, I think most people would vote for just how composed they are more than anything else, and.
I think the number of people that have been Karen in their history is so high that Kamala Harris's dumb, stupid facial expression gimmick is gonna bite her in the ass.
Hers was, words aside, what the content of her character, etc. The thing she said was one thing, but she just looked really all over the place, and Pence was just like, game on, I guess, whatever.
Well, yeah, but I mean, when you have her sitting there doing those, you can tell that if she were to talk, it would just come out very shrill, and then she did come out very shrill, but those smirks, and the I'm talking, I'm sorry, this isn't 1950.
Well, it's basically,
2020.
it's basically
Women have been cut off and shit on by women who just get free reign to do
exactly.
that kind of
It's
stuff.
it's the difference. It's the difference between her looking condescending and him looking just stern, and
There's a difference between being a strong, independent woman who is standing up for to shitty dudes and just being an absolute tool. And she was definitely on the I'm being a tool side of it, very much in the same way that Hillary Clinton was shill and unlikable. Kamala Harris is shill and unlikable, and she's a liar. And she's especially you and I are Californians, right? We know what she has done in this state. We have seen it firsthand.
Yep.
We were in school when she was the one doing the truancy stuff, right?
Yep.
We experienced all of that. So, and my wife too. I asked my wife, I'm like, all right, because we watched it together. And my wife isn't the most politically active person. She asks me a lot of questions, and I try and give her my honest feedback. But in a lot of cases, my wife is more conservative than I am. But she just doesn't understand the minutia of it. She watched that debate, and she was like, "Oh my God, I hate this woman." She's one of those same people that was grew up in the Democrat voter factory that California is. You and I went to school in Santee, and that Santana was still very much a liberal hive mind of teachers.
Oh yeah.
The most conservative teacher there was still telling me about how much more socialist and better off the people in Germany were.
Yeah, I feel you. I get you. I see you.
And when we talked about the Civil War, we didn't talk about which political party and the real ideologies. All we talked about was
North and South. Yeah.
And then we watched all of Roots to really lay in the white guilt.
Exactly. I guess.
She went through the same thing. You and I went through the same thing, right? But we still look at this and are going, God, this is stupid. You know what I mean?
I feel you.
I don't think she did them any favors.
Yeah, she probably hurt them more than anything else. But I guess all I'm trying to point to fundamentally is that this election's really just dependent on how people feel about Joe Biden for the most part. I think Trump's base is really locked in for the most part. I think he's going to get what he's going to get. So this is really just dependent on how people are going to vote for Joe Biden. And it was just funny because Kyle was telling me that, you know, when he went to Texas in Austin, and he's like, oh, there's Joe Biden signs actually exist there. And I was just like, interesting. And
yeah, but that's one of those weird culture pieces of Austin.
Oh no, and it's Austin.
Totally embrace it.
Oh no, it's Austin, yeah, absolutely.
And it's not like it's like the LA of
exactly. If it was Houston or Lincoln, Nebraska, that I'd be a little bit worried, but it is what it is.
They're like, we're in Texas and we're the liberals, so they're very, very open, and plus like when liberals moved to Texas, they moved to Austin.
So I guess
one of the things that you think that you got to see is crazy here. Like I know we're in San Diego, but we're still in California, and like this is the only major city in the country that's ran by a Republican right now that has a Republican mayor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see signs anywhere, but you know what I do see? I see those little freaking Trump swag bag places opening up everywhere.
Plus, I think just people wearing. Plus, people just wearing American flag stuff. I just feel like that's just indicative of, at the very least, trying to be like, well, I'm probably gonna vote Republican this year, more than anything else.
Yeah,
then.
Because like everybody is scared of the lunatics that will freak out on you if you have the audacity of openly supporting Trump.
I mean, I got an American flag mask, so I mean, I really don't care.
I have a Trump mask that I wear when I'm on base.
Respect.
I also have a MAGA shirt with Trump having a mullet.
I want one. America.
I definitely also always feel the sense in the air of some people don't like you can't. There will be somebody that will flip out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I like. I didn't feel this in 2016, and I was in Washington then, like deep in the heart of weirdo liberal country.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get the same sense of people not wanting, here you get these hushed, when two conservatives in the wild meet, it's this like, hey, I'm going to kind of quasi say something very, very subtle about, Trump isn't so bad, or, oh yeah, people are crazy type of thing that, and I have met more people that are secretive Republicans than I have met people that openly talk about Biden.
Mm-hmm. I feel you. I agree. I guess that's just the thing. So it just depends on how people feel about Biden, if they're actually going to go out and actually vote for him. And if I had to put cash money on it in a bet, I just don't think anyone's really going to do it. And because media comes up and a whole bunch of things come up, media, like the whole story about the whole Gretchen Wheeler trying to get taken by this. Well, I know they said anarchists. I don't know those people,
Yeah.
but I get.
They're like, oh, they're Trumpians, and it's like, no, the dude's like a Black Lives Matter supporter who says Trump is a dictator.
But I guess.
They just think Whitmer is a dictator too.
But I guess my point though is this next month's going to be incredibly critical, because I thought that my perspective was before. I think the debates are really going to solidify Trump to potentially win this, and the first debate did not go how I think Trump would have wanted it, and I think if he had a second chance at the second debate, then he would really overly correct himself in that regard, and he's not going to get it now. So if they do go ahead with a third debate, this is going to be very.
But here's what I think about the third debate too. The third debate is normally the foreign policy debate, and this is where and they're trying to make it like in the second debate is normally like the town hall take questions format.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
The fact that he has all of these peace deals. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice. He's pulled troops out of Afghanistan. He's pulled troops out of the Middle East. He's made NATO pay. Like, these are things that Obama said he would do,
Mhm.
and Obama didn't. And then you also get to go in. He'd have every way to go in on Joe Biden TPP in China.
Mhm.
Because people in the country, even the left, are starting to be very much anti-China. That's why, like, Mulan failed. It didn't even get support from the liberals, right?
Mhm.
If it came to that one, and this is why Trump was like, look, I'm not doing it virtually because Joe Biden uses teleprompters.
Mhm.
And even though, the media was like, oh, don't worry. Well, there will be press there to make sure he's not doing that. Trump's got to be like, no, this isn't happening. Like, I'm not doing it. We'll do it in person. We'll just push it off, which in reality was reasonable.
Mhm.
But then people were like, okay, well then we're gonna basically skip the third debate and have the third debate be the second debate in the town hall floor. So Trump then doesn't get to talk about what is his biggest achievement, which in reality is foreign policy.
Mhm.
Because I think, everybody likes to go, nobody likes, world leaders don't like Trump. I'm like, yeah, that's because he told them that they needed to give him money. He went to Europe and said, you're going to pay more money into NAFTA. Well, not NAFTA, into NATO. Do you like the person that increases your bills? No. That's why people, quote, don't like him on the world stage. But you know what? What American honestly cares about NATO?
None, but
The Soviet Union doesn't exist
Mhm.
anymore. Why are we playing world police? And
I feel you.
And then so a lot of these people, I personally have this feeling that they don't want him to debate anymore because the first debate was the only debate that really was going to be okay for Joe Biden.
Mhm. I feel you.
Maybe the second one because they can definitely rig the town halls, but we've all seen Trump debate. He would jump in and bull over Biden on those, or he would just not and let Biden eat his own feces. You know what I mean? Because that's because when Biden isn't handed the situation, that's what's been happening.
So I guess. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm with you. I liked Trump's performance on the first debate, but I also think that Biden overperformed. But I think Trump got into his head at the end, and if it had been longer, if it had been a multiple hour debate, like they used to be, that Trump would have ended up at the end outlasting him like a Floyd Mayweather box. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
just biting the floor. Because towards the end, he had Joe Biden flustered.
Look, I guess just to end it on that note, I think Trump's probably going to win. I just don't see any, because they're just really, really. The more that they heavily push that Biden's going to win, the less likely I think it's going to happen. It's just too many contradictory facts and realities of what's actually happening. That's really they're trying to warp a perception of reality that's not very, yeah, if that makes any particular sense. They're pushing that narrative.
I get what you're saying, especially with polls and stuff like this, where they've been much more manipulative of polls this go round than they have in the past. I definitely think Trump's going to win off of enthusiasm.
Agreed.
Because in America, the only way you get people to go out and vote and go out and be political is enthusiasm. And I just don't see it being there, but I also I'm not one of those people hyper worried about a Joe Biden presidency because he has said the words, nothing will fundamentally change. So what I think is if the president does lose in 4 years, we're going to have another Trump style person because of just how bad I think the Democrats would be under Joe Biden.
Crenshaw 2020.
I think it would. I think it's going to be like Ted Cruz with Crenshaw as the people.
Ted Cruz 2020. Or 2024.
I mean, I would also vote for Ted Cruz. The guy's a constitutional law scholar, and most of what he says passes my litmus test.
All right. Got some more time. So, did you want to talk about one or two things in particular that might be itching at your chest, or
How long have we been going now?
about 2 hours?
If I were you, I would cut it right now and like redo an introduction and be like, oh, this is the bullshit hour of the podcast, or like bullshit segment or something like that.
Okay, hang on.
Because that was a pretty good, like, we covered a lot of stuff on that other one, but I just think like for content on your channel that.
It's actually our channel, so if you guys do want the whole management thing too, then to input whatever you guys want to input, you guys just let me know, and you guys can have control too.
At some point, I just know that I'm not going to be making as much. I'm going to be making stuff with you guys, but I probably won't have the time to do stuff on my own because of 4 kids and full-time college stuff while working.
Hey, do your thing, dog. I feel you. I'm going back. I go like.
Totally down. Like if you need help with something, I can.
I feel you.
Especially if you're rocking a laptop, you can like come over to my office.
Oh, yeah. Okay, brother. Cause I probably just do most of this shit at the hospital when I go back in a couple weeks. So, whoop whoop. Radiology.
You're radiology.
Mm-hmm.
You guys use Sieverts, right, for your measurement of radiation?
It depends. Sieverts, Rankins. Doesn't really matter. We go.
I'm surprised you guys use Rankin.
It depends. We use Sievert's the whole international. Wait, Sievert's fuck. It's been fucking a long time. I haven't looked at my book. Sievert's System International.
I've always used REM, Rankin, and RADS.
Yeah,
You know what I do in the Navy, right?
something with nuclear stuff. But I didn't.
It's generic like nuclear power, but in particular, I do radiation and radiological contamination controls.
Gotcha.
Like I teach that at Point Loma
Mm-hmm.
for people that go and do contamination. So are you trying to be a radiologist or
Sorry, just give me one quick second. I just want to get my master's in radiology. I'm just trying to get all my modalities done. Just trying to work at a hospital, make like $90 an hour. You know, do my thing.
because you want to be a doctor, don't you?
I thought about it, and I go back and forth. It depends. It's just another like 3 years of extra schooling after that, and I gotta do a whole bunch of different things. Well, it's not even the money, to be honest with you, because by the point that I get my master's, I'll be making some serious bucks alone. Plus,
I've got a plan to get my master's at some point. I'm waiting to get to the civilian world to figure out what it is.
I guess my worry is that, you know, litigation. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to actually be like the doctor in charge of all that stuff. I'd rather just hand the doctor the report and let them deal with all the consequences and just do my input whenever I can within my legal, you know, like. Plus, if I get my master's, I can teach, and then, you know, it gives me a lot more potential to do whatever the fuck I want to do. Really, to be honest with you.
Well,
And
that's how I'm setting up
so-
my degrees right now.
And I think my reason too is I'd rather teach than anything else, because all this shit's pretty interesting. So I'd rather just ultimately, I don't want to work at a hospital for the rest of my life potentially. So if I go for my PhD, I'm going to be a doctor and work at a hospital. I'm not gonna do anything else really otherwise. Otherwise, I feel like it's just extra wasted time just for me to do more hours, more surgeries, more all that stuff. You know, and it's a lot of requirements. Yeah, and.
I mean, I'm with you on wanting to teach because, like, we had such subpar intellectual teachers that I really think that, like, if I would love to be like a high school math, science, and history teacher. But that's me.
I love history, man. I feel ya.
Right now. Yeah, because like one of the things that kind of makes me laugh is like I'm doing calculus stuff right now, and calculus has like real world no shit implications, and like processes that algebra doesn't immediately outwardly have for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm a nerd, so I think that that's absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
But I like when have you ever you've been in that position where you go and you take a math class and you're like, what even am I gonna do with this? And like,
Oh, I feel you.
don't know how to answer.
I'm the one Asian that's bad at math, so I feel you.
Don't be racist to yourself.
Yeah, Jap. Just kidding.
Asians don't have to be good at math. What are you talking about? No, I feel you. But there's just so much that like you could actually, if you were a good teacher, I feel like you could be better at imparting onto people, like not using dumb freaking packets and not just like generically going, oh, this is this and it's like calculate this, but if you actually knew what you were like, if an engineer taught math, like how much better it would be for people learning math.
Much better, yeah.
Instead we get idiots teaching other, like the blind leading the blind, and to me it's just insane that that's how we have our schooling system set up.